ሰላም ተመልካቾቻችን እንደምን ሰንብታችኋል? እንግዲህ የዛሬ ፕሮግራማችን ካለፈው ሳምንት ከሰራነው ዝግጅት ጋር የተያያዘ ነው። ከዛ የቀጠለ ነው። እንደዚህ ስንል ባለፈው ሳምንት ከዶክተር ዮዲትና ከባለቤቷ ጋር ቆይታ አድርገን ነበር። ስለ ልጃቸው ቅዱስ ታሪክ ነግረውን ነበረ። ከሱ በተነሳ የጀመሩት የበጎ አድራጎት ድርጅት ቅዱስ ሌጋሲ ፋውንዴሽን የሚባለው በዛ ስር በጣም ትልልቅ ስራ እየሰሩ ነው። ፕሮጀክቶች የጀመሯቸው አሉና አንደኛው ፕሮጀክት ቅዱስ ሌጋሲ ፋሚሊ ዌልነስ የሚባል ነውና በዛ ስር እዚህ ሀገር አሜሪካን ሀገር ያሉ ኢትዮጵያውያኖችና ኤርትራውያኖችን በማሰባሰብ ቤተሰብን በተመለከተ የተለያዩ ወርክሾፕ በመስጠት በመገናኘት ሜንታል ሄልትን በተመለከተ እንደው በአጠቃላይ ዌልነስን ከልጆች ከወላጆቻቸው ጋር ያላቸው ግንኙነት ምን ይመስላል፣ እንዴት አድርገን መረዳዳት እንችላለን፣ እንዴት አድርገን ልጆቻችንን መረዳት እንችላለን፣ እኛም ለነሱ የሚያስፈልጋቸውን ድጋፍ እንዴት መስጠት እንችላለን በሚለው ነገር ላይ ኮሚኒቲ ቤዝድ የሆነ ስራ እየሰሩ ነው። እና ይሄንን በተመለከተ በተለይ የዛሬ ፕሮግራማችን የሚሆነው በእንግሊዝኛ ነው። እንግዲህ መጀመሪያ ይቅርታ መጠየቅ ፈልጋለሁ። የሄለን ሾው ፕሮግራም እንደምታውቁት በአማርኛ ነው ሁሌ የምናደርገው። በዛሬ ግን የምናዘጋጀው ፕሮግራም ብዙዎችን በተለይ ኢትዮጵያውያኖችን እዚህ ሀገር ያሉትን ኢትዮጵያውያኖች ልጆችን በተለይም ከኢትዮጵያ ውጭም ደግሞ ያሉ ብዙ ኢትዮጵያውያን ልጆች አሉ አማርኛ የማይናገሩ ግን እነሱንም ሁሉ ለመንካት በማሰብ ነው የዛሬን ፕሮግራም በእንግሊዝኛ ልናደርግ የወሰንበት ምክንያት እና እንግዶቼን አስተዋውቃችኋለሁ። ወደ ፕሮግራማችን እንገባለን። ዋናው ሐሳቡ ይሄ suicide ይሄ ራስን ማጥፋት ምን እንደሆነ ምን አይነት ምልክቶች እንዳሉት ምን አድርገን እነዚህ ነገሮች አይተን ከወደፊቱ ማቆም የምንችላቸው ነገሮች ካሉ መመልከት ያለብን ነገሮች ማወቅ ያለብን ነገሮች እንነጋገራለን ማለት ነው። ዶክተር ዮዲት እንደገና ከኛ ጋር በመቆየትሽ በጣም አድርጌ አመሰግንሻለሁ። እንግዲህ አሁን የጋበዝናቸው እንግዶች አብሮሽ ነው የሚሰሩት በዚህ በቅዱስ ሌጋሲ ፋውንዴሽን ዌልነስ ዶክተር ኢሌኒ ጌታቸው ሳይኮሎጂስት፣ አይዳ በንጉሴ ሶሻል ወርከር፣ ሰየ ወርቄ ሶሻል ወርከር መልቲካልቸራል ኮች እንደዚሁም ደግሞ ዮዲት አማሃ ሶሻል ወርከር እና እንግዲህ ሁሉም በዚህ ላይ ነው የሚሰሩት። በጣም ራሳቸውን ሰጥተው ይሄን በዚህ ስራ ላይ ህብረተሰባቸውን ለማገልገል የተነሱ ሰዎች ናቸውና I thank everybody for coming on the program። እስቲ ወደ ፕሮግራማችን እንገባለን ማለት ነው። እንዳልኩት የዛሬ ፕሮግራም የሚሆነው በእንግሊዝኛ ነው ማለት ነው። Hi everybody, welcome Dr. Eleni, Aida, Yodit and work Saye. Hi everybody. Thank you for joining us. Dr. Eleni, I'm going to start with you. Suicide is the third leading cause of death for 15 to 24-year-olds according to the CDC. That's a staggering number to just comprehend. I don't know if this statistics includes Ethiopian American and Eritrean Americans in this country, but obviously it's a big number. So help us understand the statistics. Can you break it down for us?
Sure. I can speak Amharic if you want me to. So whichever way that's preferable for you. But so suicide actually is really horrible and it's really sad. And it's an avoidable cause of mortality that is a tragedy for all involved, the families, the friends and the neighbors and the colleagues and the communities as whole. And right now, they did a research in around 2013, and suicide at the time, and right now as well, is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States overall. According to the research article, Journal of Health Case Compliance, suicide in the United States is increasing. It's when globally it's actually falling. So to the question that you have asked in regards to our community, the Ethiopian and Eritrean community in the United States, there's not that I know of actually, there's no research done on the numbers actually that the people who have committed suicide or attempted suicide. So what we're speaking about here generally is as a whole the American population. Among people aged 15 to 24, suicide is ranked second leading cause of death, and and it was also the second leading cause of death for youth, young adults from 10 to 34. And also the data shows between the year of 2009 and 2018 that the rates is increasing actually among all age groups. And in recent years, what we've seen is among adults between the ages of 25 and 44, that has surpassed the suicidal rate of older adults, which is 65 plus. Just to give you an overview, many more people actually do attempt suicide than completing or dying from suicide. But when we look at across all age groups, a greater percentage of adults think about suicide than attempting. And when we look at the gender composition, the percentage of female high school students who either considered or planned suicide is much higher than male high school students.
So why do people attempt suicide? Ida, maybe you can start on this one for me.
Sure. I can talk about theory. Thomas Joyner, an expert in the study of suicide, developed a theory called Interpersonal theory of suicide to explain three major components that are present in people who that are present and can result in a desire to die by suicide. Not in any particular order. The first one is a thwarted sense of belongingness. So that means a person may feel very isolated or disconnected from others. So that means disconnected from their peers, from work, family, society, community, or their culture. The second one is a perceived sense of burdensomeness. So that means they may believe that they are a burden to their family, their friends, culture, to society. They may think that in death, they may be worth more than in life. And I say perceived because others around them, like their friends or their family, may not think the same way or believe that at all. So even in its falsehood, it can be very powerful, that sense that I'm a burden. And the last one he talks about is acquired capability, which means this is a person who has life experiences which have exposed them to death. So it has essentially weakened their fear of it. This kind of exposure could be in the form of extreme physical pain, injuries, accidents, witnessing a traumatic event, or being a survivor of one, suffering an illness, engaging in self-harm. So this makes people more likely to attempt to die by suicide. So all three factors in combination can create a high risk or desire.
Dr. Yodit, how do we connect this with our community? Do we have the same, would you say the same factors apply to our community, or is there something different for us?
I would like to thank you for doing this in English.
Okay.
And one of the reasons we asked that this program be done in English is because we are hoping that families in our community, the parents and their children, can sit and watch the program together. And because this is affecting our children more than anyone, so if we're going to do a program, we felt that the children, as well as the parents, should be able to participate in it. I went through that. So I can tell you, suicide can touch anyone. I also challenge my community that through all my pain, through all my challenges, if I'm willing to sit here and talk about suicide, my own child's suicide, being behind it, I challenge my community to open their minds and their hearts and think about it. Think, is this possible? Because if it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. And so it is happening in our community, unfortunately. I get calls once a week, maybe every other week, whether it's in the state or in another state, this tragedy happening to other families in Ethiopian or Eritrean in our community. And so our community may not know it because it's in denial. It may not be recognizing it. But the fact that we don't see it, it doesn't mean it's not happening. It is happening, we just don't see it. And so it is not unique to us. It is happening in the US. It's almost epidemic. The age is widening, that it happens to younger kids and the young adults. And so it is happening in our community. And unfortunately, I cannot give you an exact number, but it can happen in any family. So I challenge my Ethiopian, Eritrean, or Abesha community to listen. If we don't recognize a problem, we are not going to do anything about it. So to be able to do something, we need to first agree that this problem is in our community as well. We don't think it's more in our community than anywhere else, but we exist in this community. We can only talk about this community because this is the one we know, so we are talking in that community. And it is happening to kids as young as 10 and to young adults as old as 25, 30. So that is what I would like to remind my community. Consider it, think it. And suicide is the end result, right? People go through a lot of problems or a lot of challenges or a lot of difficulties before they commit that. So as our discussion is to catch things before we get there. So that is how I would like to bring it to my community.
Yeah, and we're going to address a lot of those, based on the workshop that you did, which you had, not only parents, you also had children there with parents, and there were a lot of topics that you guys touched on and you've discussed, and they were able to open up, which I thought was just wonderful, to be able to say what you feel, to know what you feel, and then be able to express it so that your parents can understand what you're going through. So we're going to address a lot of those as we go on in the program, but let's take a quick break and we come back and we'll continue our discussion. We'll take a quick break and we'll be right back. We're back on our program on the Helen Show today. As I said in our initial introduction, we are doing this program in English because we want to make sure we touch as many people as possible. And so we're going to continue with our program. Dr. Eleni, let me come back to you. So who is at high risk of committing suicide?
So right now, the data shows that women are at greater risk for suicidal ideation. That means thinking about it. Attempts, that means they did something about it. And there were actually medically treated attempts that met. But when it comes to actually going through the suicide, men die by suicide at a higher rate than women. And also when we look at the, according to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services, which is SAMHSA here, young adults between the ages of 18 to 25 are at a higher risk of serious thoughts of suicide and behavior than many other groups. So suicide risk is generally elevated for people with major mental illness, which is such as bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, depression. So all that population is at high risk.
This is the heartbreaking thing about this is, lately all the suicides that I've been hearing are among teens, young adults. And so why is it affecting teenagers? And in what proportion is it affecting teenagers? Maybe Ida, you can respond on this one.
Sure. Teenagers are a vulnerable population because they're going through a lot in their adolescence. They're going through physical and developmental changes. The parts of their brains responsible for problem solving, impulse control, and decision making is still developing. all while they are trying to make important decisions in their life, and oftentimes under a lot of stress and expectation, which can leave them feeling pretty ineffective. It is a time when they're establishing a sense of self, purpose, and identity, and they're trying to figure out where they belong. A social life, belonging, and relationships are very important to teenagers, so losses in those areas through breakups, death of friends, or rejection, bullying can have a significant impact on risk. Teenagers may be at risk of suicide, especially if they've been exposed to peers who have died, or on a larger scale, if their exposure is increased through the media or in culture. Negative experiences in childhood, such as abuse, neglect, witnessing physical violence in the home, can also raise risk. And if means are available in the house, such as firearms, that can also increase the risk. But it's important to note that all teens who have these experiences will not commit suicide. Resilience in the form of internal coping skills and external resources can be a protective factor. Internal coping skills are strategies that help someone manage difficult emotions and circumstances that might occur in their lives, while external resources could mean having opportunity, having the support of their family or their community, or being engaged in treatment.
So I want to ask about, some of the warning signs, and maybe Dr. Yodit, I want to bring you in on this because it was shocking for you to find out. Qudus, grew up in a loving home. When you think about it, he's been given everything that he needed, not only just a loving and supportive parents, but his needs were met. He grew up in a nice home. And so when we think about these things, especially as immigrants, I think the first thing that, I think about is, okay, am I providing for my children? And so if I'm providing for my children, especially if, we're sending them to private school, we're doing all these things for them, we're expecting that, they're just going to go to school, they come back home. We don't really understand a lot of the challenges, especially children that are, being raised in this country. We don't really anticipate or understand some of the challenges that they may be going through, right? So in a way, I guess looking at it as hindsight, were there some things that you think you could have, that were there you could have seen, or maybe there were some telltale signs? Let me see, from your perspective, and then I'm going to ask Dr. Eleni and Ida if there are warning signs that we could see in general.
So you brought up a good point. That is, if you had asked me 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I would have told you, what is suicide? Yeah. How on earth? I mean, there was nothing I would have thought would touch my family. And I think that's the challenge. The challenge that we feel it's not about us. It's about those people, right? It makes it very difficult to recognize signs, I think. Now, of course, hindsight is 20/20, as we say. And so if I look back, maybe there were things that if I had put 2 and 2 together, I would have suspected. But for me, it's still a struggle to go back and say, you know what, maybe this. For example, as I mentioned in the previous program, my son did come to us and say, Mommy, I have depression, I think, because the things that excite you guys doesn't excite me. I have a potential, but I don't accomplish my potential. So he had an insight to it. But I think there was somewhere a breakdown, even though he admitted to me, and I took him to the professionals, that he was not ready to admit, if this was the end, that this was going on in his mind. So I will never know if this was something he was contemplating for a while, or it was a last minute thing. I will never know. But so this is one of those signs. If it is a sign, the fact that he came and talked to us, and I'm grateful. I'm truly grateful that I took action, that I didn't say, oh, what are you talking about? People have different interests, so let's just leave it alone. I did not make that decision. I'm grateful for that I talked to my husband. We made as a family a decision. I made my husband talk to him so that my husband is also sure that this is the right decision, even though he had a dilemma with it. But in the end, he said, if we don't go to the experts, where are we going to go? So if there were signs, even now when I go back, it is difficult for me to see them, because sometimes how do you separate their character from the depression, their interest from lack of interest? Like, he was an introvert usually, so he liked to stay home. And so is that a bad thing, or should you have taken an insight? But I think that's why we are having this discussion, so that actively you look at things, and if you see and you have questions, you go to the expert. So now looking back, I wish I had gone myself and asked someone saying, what do you think? And maybe I would have had some advice that had made me focus on these things would make a difference.
You just never know.
Yeah, it's a difficult, challenging.
Absolutely, I can only imagine. But as a doctor, maybe Dr. Eleni or Ida, one of you can answer this. In general terms, what are the warning signs for suicide?
The major warning signs are one is that when the child or the person talks about wanting to die or wanting to kill oneself, and this doesn't mean that the conversation that we had, I want to die, jokingly, that's not what it means. But when someone is in distress and say, this is my desire. And also when they look for things to kill themselves, and also when they talk about feeling hopeless and not having any reason to live, and talking about feelings of being trapped, and the pain that they're experiencing. And when I say the pain that they're experiencing, it could be emotional pain and also physical pain. And when they talk about being a burden to others, and when there is an increase of substances, alcohol or drugs, and also when they act a little bit agitated or more agitated, and they feel anxious more than usual when they're out of their own behavior, and when they also behave recklessly. And the other part is that when they sleep too little or too much, and when they isolate themselves, when withdraw themselves, and when they show rage or talking about seeking revenge on others, and displaying extreme mood swings as well.
Ida, anything else you want to add?
No, I think that Dr. Eleni covered that pretty well.
How about genetics? Does genetic play any role in it? Do you know?
Yes. So suicide is too complex to be generally explained by just one gene, but studies have shown that a family history can raise someone's risk twofold. The scientific studies that are showing risk are related to genes involved in the dysfunction of serotonin. Serotonin is a chemical in the brain that is important for mood, sleep, and appetite. There are also genetic involved in mental illnesses, as well as personality traits like impulsivity that may increase someone's risk.
So Dr. Eleni, what should someone do? Like if someone is saying they're thinking about committing suicide, or they're talking about it, let's say if parents find something on their kid's computer, anything that kind of signals that there may be a thought or maybe even an attempt in suicide. So what would someone do, whether it's a family member, a friend? What should we be doing?
So depending on the gravity of the person's presentation, and when I say this, is that when the person is coming and saying that, look, I want to kill myself, and then they have a weapon with them, and the safest thing to do is to call 911 here in this country and get some help. But the other thing that we can also do is if the presentation is not so high, we can ask them directly if they do feel and think about killing themselves. And that, in part, it does not mean that it gives them the idea in their head to make it more likely to commit suicide. the other part is that it's really important when someone comes and says, this is the way I feel, for us to listen without any judgment and really embrace them and show how much we care. So that's really important. And then the other thing is also we need to stay with this person and make sure that they're in a private and secure place until we get further help. And also removing any objects that could harm them or that they can use to commit suicide. And in addition to this, I think every one of us can play a role in preventing suicide. For instance, faith communities can work to prevent suicide simply by fostering cultures and norms that are life-preserving, providing perspective and social support to community members, and helping people navigate the struggles of life to find sustainable sense of hope, meaning, and purpose.
That's great. And I think the most important thing is also to make sure that we don't dismiss, we don't belittle. If someone has the tendency of in any way, shape, or form, even if we cannot handle that situation ourselves, sometimes we might feel ill-equipped to even, we may not even know what to say to that person. So let's just find someone who knows, whether it's counseling, whether it's a church member or somebody else that's better equipped than us, especially if you're parents. Sometimes you don't even know what to say if your kid has certain tendencies and you suspect, sometimes parents have intuition. They see things, but they don't, but we don't maybe want to take it seriously, or we might think it's just a phase. It's always better to err on the side of caution and say, hey, let me talk to you. What's going on? Let's have a conversation. Can I get you some help? What's going on? Those are the questions that we need to ask. Don't dismiss it. Don't act like it's not there. Just address it fully, right? As much as we can. Let's take a quick break and come back, and then we're going to talk specifically about our community and things that we can do for our kids. Okay, we'll be right back. All right, so we're back. We're talking about suicide. I want to bring it back to our community. So what are the challenges within the Ethiopian and Eritrean community? And then I would want Essay to get into this as well. Immigrant parents, we have a different set of challenges. There's a lot as families that we do here. Most of us are hardworking. We are juggling a lot of different things, but more than anything, the cultural aspect of it. We're living in two different cultures. Sometimes we're not well equipped to reconcile both. And so tell us about what may lead to mental health issues or some of the challenges that families may have internally with their children.
So, I can speak as an immigrant parent who tried to raise her child here. What are the challenges? So, as an immigrant parent, I left Ethiopia when I finished high school. I have lived twice as many years away from Ethiopia. But yet my culture, where I grew up, is within me. And even as I get older, I see that culture is becoming stronger instead of less. So there is that culture I brought in from where I was. And then there is the emotional aspect, or the way I look at life, the way I look at society, or the way I practice my religion, the way I do certain things. All of that, even though I have lived here many years, still is the one that I brought from there. But traveling from that space to here, I have also gone through a lot of trauma. I have also gone through emotional and social and psychological challenges. So I bring all of that here with me. And because that's what I know, even though I live here, that is what I try to give to my children, because that's what I know. Now, the children that are born here are clean slate. They don't know any of it. And so, because this is what I know, I try to impact only what I know. And the children, when they are very young, it is easy for them because that, I'm the parent, but as they grow older, and they are out in society, they see a totally different culture, totally different psychological aspect of life, emotional, cultural, and all they know is these two worlds are their own. And I try to make them no matter what, an Ethiopian.
Yeah.
And our children are neither only Ethiopian or only American. They are Ethiopian American, and they have to assimilate those. And so as long as I am still holding on to all the things I have gone through, and I don't want to forget the fact that the immigrant story is an overcoming story, right? Yes. So I definitely want to emphasize that we have overcome all these things, but they are still inside us. We are resilient, we are hardworking, we accomplish a lot of things, and we want to impact all of that to our children too. But all the way we know how to deliver it, or the way how we try to give it to our children, may not be easily accepted by our children who live in the two cultures. So from a parent side, that's what I see it. And Saye, I'm sure, will explain to you.
Yeah, so
more.
Saye, like as a first generation Ethiopian Americans, what are the challenges with them specifically when they're trying to live between two cultures? They're struggling, sometimes we don't understand what their struggles are, because all we see is, hey, I'm providing for you, I'm giving you all of these things, all you have to do is just study and be good, that's it. But we don't necessarily understand some of the challenges they have internally, things that they're struggling with because of society, social media, and all of those things. So can you tell me, from a perspective of first generation Ethiopian Americans or Eritrean Americans, those challenges, what do you say they are?
Sure. First, let me begin, Helen, by thanking you so much for bringing attention to this very important issue, and to recognize Yodit for her inspirational leadership and courage in opening up this platform for all of us to benefit from it. As a first generation Ethiopian American myself, who came to the US at 4, I can speak both from my personal experience and my professional work as a social worker and as a coach. Ida mentioned earlier that according to one of the leading theories around suicide, belonging and the opposite, isolation, is at the core of it. And I think for any young person who is trying to juggle both their Ethiopian or Eritrean culture and the American culture, it's challenging because you never quite fit in either place 100%. And you become aware of that. So you wonder to yourself, why are the rules in my home different than all of the rules in my friends or classmates' homes? For example, a common thing is a sleepover. In our culture, we don't allow children to sleep over other people's homes unless we know the family extremely well. And that's out of protection, out of a safeguard. But a child, a teenager, may interpret that as, my parent must not trust me, or there must be something wrong with me that they're telling me no. And so that internal process of the meaning making that you make out of the different rules can cause isolation and a sense of not belonging. As an added layer, because we are African immigrants and we are people of color, in this country, there is a large issue around race, ethnicity, and identity. And many of the young people that we talk to, both in our community forum and outside of that, have indicated it's very difficult to live in a world not only where you're dealing with the American and Ethiopian or Eritrean cultures, but on top of that, socially among your friends, you're embracing the African American culture. But other places, you may hear negative comments about that culture. And so that's another threat against your identity, which is still in the formation process.
I totally agree with that, because, and this is just becoming even more apparent because we grew up in Ethiopia. We didn't really grow up with the baggage of what it means to grow up in a culture like the US, especially the racism and all the baggage that comes with racism in this country. We don't really understand, we don't feel it. I know I never felt it when I came to this country, and even people were discriminating against me. I just didn't know, I just thought they were mean people. But for children that are born in this country, it's inherent, it's in their blood. They know it growing up. Like my son at 12 years old knows that he's an African American. That means the world does not look at him the same way that they do his other white friends in the classroom. He knows there are different standards for him. And so that's something that we can't really relate to with them when we're talking to them. It's hard for us to understand. So if we can't really think of these things in those terms, we're not able to understand them. We're not going to be looking at it in empathy and saying, oh, okay, you may be struggling with this. This is what you need to do as an African-American boy in this country. So we won't be able to have those intelligent conversations with our children about the culture itself. So that's what makes it very, very difficult, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I can give you a good example. When Ferguson happened, I was working with my partner, and my partner is an African-American. So I went to her office and said, so what do we do now? We both have boys. And she said, what do you mean? You have not had the talk? I'm like, what talk? She said, you have not discussed this with your son, that if a police officer stops him, what he's supposed to do? I told her, well, we live in a community. She said, what has got to do with anything? Especially your son. Because you may have the finances and the means, you may provide him with a decent car, but the world may think he does not have that car legitimately. He's prejudged. So I was
by
totally
virtue of his skin. Yeah.
I went home, and I have never had this discussion before. I did not know how to start it. Because when we raise our kids, we focus on Ethiopianness, which is wonderful. That's what our core is. But we also have to understand the African-American aspect of it and teach our kids that, yes, they are Ethiopian. Ethiopia is in Africa. This is a culture that discriminates you by your color. Your Ethiopianness is your strength. But you are that. That is not going to be, that is not going to be how you're going to fight out there. Yes, they're going to attack you. Then people who believe in race discrimination are going to attack you just by your skin. So I think and it's not because we don't recognize ourselves as black, but for us, Ethiopianness comes first, which is great. This is our strength. But for our children, I think we have to learn.
And I think most Ethiopians struggle with that. I think most Ethiopians actually, even for a long time, I think when I first came to this country, they used to feel other in like immigration forms. And I say, you're not other, you're black. That means you're, for this country, you're African American. It doesn't matter how you look at yourself. Yes, you're Ethiopian. Yes, you identify with that. Your history, everything that you are is important. But in this country, when you live in this country, you are African American. That's it. It's just, there's no ifs and buts about it. And so our children are going to grow in this culture. So that means we have to raise them understanding what this is, what this means, correct?
Absolutely. We also forget that we are successful when we come in because of our brothers and sisters who paid with their life for generations to make it easy for us to come in and succeed. So we are definitely African, actually the true African, because we came from Africa and we are in America. I mean, there is no other word that can define us. We are African American. That came from Ethiopia. That should be our definition, and that's the truth.
And say Yodit had explained, the parents' perspective from her own personal experience. In general, what do you see the challenge from the parents' perspective as they relate to their children as immigrants? What do you see?
I think it's important to recognize that both the youth and the parents have a tremendous amount of strength. Anytime that someone uproots their life and comes to a new country, it's a transformational experience. And there's a lot of resilience and creativity and adaptation, which is important to recognize. On top of it, though, I think the challenges come where the parents are thinking about, as you said earlier, Helen, all of the sacrifices they made, all of the effort they're putting into their education and their well-being. And their expectation is that the child will take advantage of all of the benefits they're giving. On the flip side, though, what is foundational for any person, youth or otherwise, is an investment in their social and emotional well-being. We know for our physical health that we have to eat right and we have to exercise. That's elementary. That's very basic, right? In the same way, for someone to be healthy psychologically, then there has to be an emotional and social investment. And that's where some of the skills that we talk about at the Kudus Legacy Foundation comes in. How do you communicate with your youth? How do you manage conflict? How do you listen to their opinions while maintaining yourself as the authority in the home? And I think in many instances, youth and parents talk across each other without having a deeper understanding of the assumptions that each other are making and the real meaning that they're trying to reach into each other's hearts.
That's incredible. So when we come back, I do want to go to the workshop that you did. There were some questions that you asked parents, and there were questions that you asked teenagers. I'd love for us to go over that so we can kind of paint this picture and then help parents better communicate with their children. So we'll be right back. So we're back talking about suicide. One thing that I loved about the workshop that you did, Kudus Legacy Foundation Wellness, what I loved about it is that you've included the teenagers, you included children and parents. The conversation was not just for the parents, but you brought the kids over so they can tell you what they're feeling, what they're thinking. A lot of times, because we're busy as parents, we don't necessarily spend some time. I mean, I think COVID-19, the only gift that I think we got from it, I would say, is me being able to spend quality time with my children, and my children telling me, Mom, you're actually listening to what I have to say, which is just amazing, because the more they talk, the more you hear. And when you hear, you understand what their thought process is and how they're, handling situation. How are they processing all these things that are coming at them? I mean, this week, the biggest news is George Floyd, the African-American man that was killed by the white police officer. That is a very, very traumatic story. For some kids who are very sensitive to these kinds of things, this could be something that puts them over the edge, because anxiety can take over. They could be so stressed out. We as Ethiopians who grew up in Ethiopia, yes, the humanity, the tragedy of it might hurt us, but we may not feel it deep inside the race issues that are happening in this country. But our children are definitely impacted by it significantly more than we are. So I want to just briefly, I want you and Essie to address, what are some of the points that the parents raised and some of the points that the children raised? And then you can tell me about specifically what the foundation is doing.
So the first program we had, our main purpose was to strengthen relationship within the family unit. So as you said, we invited the parents and their children to come. So initially we presented with them a sample or an example of a family and a child that have lived here, and a parent that has raised a child and a kid that has lived here. And then in the next part, we gave them information about what we are trying to impact, or how we're trying to improve the communication and the relationship in the family unit. And then we divided the group into parents on one side as a group discussion and children on the other side, and each one with experts in the field being in the room. So at the end of that discussion, we asked them to write something, the parents to write something to their children. My child, this is what I want you to know. And then we asked the children to write something saying, my mom, my dad, I want you to know this. So that is what we have here, and some examples of what the parents said. So I can tell you as a parent, and Sayye can tell you what the youth said. My child, or our children, my child, the one thing I want you to know is, I want my kids to know that if they align themselves with God, He will take them to their destination. The ultimate guide is God. And Sayye can tell you what the youth said.
So Sayye, what did the youth say?
Yes, so we actually have 2 pages of quotes from the youth, which is remarkable because if you just ask, they have so much to offer in terms of thoughts and opinions. The one that I selected for us says, Mom, Dad, the one thing I want you to know is please be open to what I have to say when we're arguing or talking, and not to instantly label it as talking back or being disrespectful, when I just want my opinion to reach you and be accepted by you.
And then the
That's
parent
powerful.
said, "My child, please believe me when I say all topics can be brought to me for discussion. Nothing is too little, too big, too taboo, too much to bring to my attention. I have your back to the day I die."
Ah, that is a very powerful thing to say. And what did the kids say?
Another example of a quote is, "Dear Mom and Dad, one thing I want you to know is that I appreciate everything you've done for me, and I recognize all the sacrifices that you've made for me. But growing up in a different country means that the way you were raised should not be the same way as me because we live in different times."
That's so true. That's what my kids say to me. Let's do one more each. Okay.
And then the parents say, "My child, please understand, everything I do is about love. I'm sorry if I keep comparing you with other kids, but this is the only way I know how to make you understand. But remember, I love you."
And what did the kids say?
"Mama, Baba, I want you to know that I see you for who you are. More than just my mother and father, I see you as a man and a woman who have experienced life. As I grow older, I want you to see me as more than just your child, but also a confidant and a friend. Love, your child."
This is so beautiful. I think the most important thing for me, from what you just said right now, for a parent to say, "I'm open to hear whatever you have to say." I think, we grew up in a culture, in a society, and, both my parents, I feel, were very modern. They're both, well-educated, but still there was always this divide between a father and a child because you respect your parents. As close as we were, I think, in most families, I think by virtue of what they were exposed to, they were, trying to get as close to us as possible. But I still felt like there was still a divide there, parents and we're children. But in this country, we don't have that luxury of being separated. We don't have that luxury of, hey, my kids are going to go outside and play and they can come home and everything is okay, because the challenges are very, very different. So parents who raise their children in this country, even in Ethiopia right now, because the world has changed significantly, have to be open for anything that their children bring to their attention. It's better that you talk to me and you and I figure out the challenges versus you trying to take that out to someone else that may not have the best interest at heart for you. You know what I'm saying? I think parents need to really recognize and be open. You have to be really, really open. Your children have to feel comfortable in coming to you. That's it. I think that's the bottom line. I think we can overcome a lot of these challenges if our children can say, you know what, I'm struggling with this. I'm struggling with peers at school. I'm struggling with my education. I'm struggling with this, with that. I can go and talk to my father, or I can go and talk to my mother. They should be able to say that. They shouldn't fear us, right? They shouldn't say, oh, God, I can't talk to her because she's going to say this, she's going to say that. I don't know. I mean, I think that's what...
Definitely, it is one of the reasons Qudus Legacy Family Wellness was established.
Okay.
So that, if nothing else, that our children know that we won't judge them.
Mm-hmm.
Even when we don't understand the matter that they bring with us, we'll be willing to listen without judgment. And we will be willing to find solutions together as a family.
Mm-hmm.
That is what we're trying to make sure. Parents are willing to do that, and kids see that, understand that. And when they are in trouble, they will be willing to come. And then families together, whether in their community or with the expert, can find the solution. So that is one of our aims. And the Sayyid will tell you more about Qudus Family Wellness.
Yeah, Sayyid, why don't you go ahead and... You do a lot of it. Why don't you go ahead and tell us, some of the things that you're working on, especially for parents and even, teenagers.
Absolutely. I think the core message here, Helen, is that we can't help or save everyone, but we can do more than what we have been doing as a community so far. And the first step is to raise awareness to acknowledge as a community that lots of people, both young people and people of all ages, are suffering silently. And the second step is related. Once we've acknowledged it, we need to create safe spaces. The healing is in relationships, whether it's a relationship with a therapist, a parent, a friend, or what have you. You know, those of us who grew up in Ethiopia, while we may have had some distance out of respect with our parents, we had a community of cousins and friends where we belonged and we could share our deeper, darker secrets and get support. In this country, friendships look differently. We're in a transient community. So the Quddus Legacy Foundation wants to create safe spaces where people can share what's going on with them without the threat of judgment or shame. Then the third step is to strengthen the social and emotional skills of both the parents and the youth so that they can actually communicate and understand each other in a healthy way and say some of the things that we just read as quotes from the One Thing activity at our community forum last March. And then finally, because we know that some people will want to have individual counseling, individual help, we want to create a directory of culturally competent therapists and counselors who can help both the youth, the parent, and the family and community as a whole to heal from traumas and to know that there is hope. Whatever depression or anxiety they may be experiencing at the moment, there is treatment available and you can have a happy and productive life outside of that tunnel of darkness.
That's great. Anything you want to add to that?
I think Saya put it well. So we are not there to tell people how to live their life. We are not there to tell people how to raise their kids. But we are there to have them communicate between themselves and to let that communication be healthy. Parents are willing to listen to what the child has to say, even if they don't agree with it. And kids start to understand where their parents come from when they say certain things. And so that if the parent is doing something, the child would say, oh, I know why she's saying this, because they understand. So that the most important thing is communication. And the next one, as Saya said, is that there is no problem that's too little that you cannot ask for help. But ask help from the right people.
That's true.
If you go to someone who's negative and tells you, oh, forget it, kids are spoiled, then you may not take the right action. So that is one of the reasons we try to get the list of culturally competent social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists, and see if people feel if I go to the psychologist in my healthcare, what is she going to understand, right? She doesn't know how I live, and so that people can feel these people who are experts in the field also understand where I come from.
That's true.
They understand what goes on in my home. So, but get help. If you see something, please go talk to experts or to people you trust and have an open mind.
That's true. Dr. Ileni, is there any final thoughts that you have when it comes to suicide in our community? Anything that you feel our viewers need to know?
Suicide is avoidable. So when one is suffering and in pain, they don't have to suffer and in pain by themselves. There are plenty of resources. Our community may not know this, but there are plenty of resources. When your child or someone is not behaving or is not acting the way that used to, or what their usual is, I think it's really important to take a pause and ask what is happening with that person. It's not only depression that is one of the factors for suicide. There are plenty of issues and factors that contribute to that. And again, there are many resources. Unfortunately, there are not that many Mariña or Tigrinya speaking therapists or mental health practitioners, but there are resources that they can be used.
So tell us the website again for Quddus Family Legacy Wellness, and how could people get in touch with you?
So the Quddus Legacy Wellness is part of the Quddus Legacy Foundation.
Okay.
So the website is Quddus Legacy Foundation
Okay.
on QuddusLegacy.com.
Okay.
Under that, you'll find the Quddus Family Wellness.
Okay.
And so in that, you will find information. We encourage people to join us, become a member, get involved. Most of the stuff we do is free. There's no expenses. But the community, I want to say that it is okay to speak out your challenges. I learned that. I discovered that. When I spoke out, I found Eleni by just Googling. And she is like a sister now to me. I found Ida by just asking. Esaye is my family, but the moment I said my idea, she was ready to jump and help. So our community has a lot of resources. And so we need to be vulnerable so that we can get what we need. And so please go to QuddusLegacy.com and you'll find both the projects that we do here in the US as well as the projects we do in Ethiopia.
That's wonderful. All right, so the whole message of this program is, and thank you, Dr. Yodit and everyone that joined us today, you are not alone. You should not suffer by yourself. If you're a teenager who's struggling with a lot of issues and you don't feel like there's a way out for you, there's always a way out. You can always go to Quddus Legacy Foundation website and get some help there. Parents, the same way. They do workshops, right? You've been doing Zoom workshops right now when you're not able to do face-to-face, but they also do face-to-face meetings, obviously, once everything opens up. I'm sure you have some things planned. So please get the help that you need because it's out there, right? Alright እንግዲህ ተመልካቾቻችን እንግዲህ ፕሮግራማችንን ሳጠቃልል ማለት ነው እንግዲህ እንዳልነው የዛሬ ፕሮግራማችን በእንግሊዝኛ ያደረግነው ዋናው ምክንያቱ ሁሉም ወጣት እዚህ ሀገርም ያለም ኢትዮጵያም ያለ ዩሮፕም ያለ በሙሉ መሳተፍ እንዲችልበት በማሰብ ነው እንግዲህ ፕሮግራማችን በዚህ ላይ ያበቃል በሚቀጥለው ሳምንት በሌላ ፕሮግራም እስከምንገናኝ ደህና ቆዩልን